Could you please explain to me, when you made these devices, what your intent was?
Murder, mayhem, chaos, damage, get on the news. Top story, really.
In the year of 1999, England's capital city of London was rocked by almost a month's worth of terrifying events, coordinated in such a regimented fashion that even the public knew when the next catastrophic incident was likely to take place. This was a series of events fueled by anger, resentment, and a hatred towards minority communities. But who was this person that was putting fear into the citizens of London? And more importantly, why were they doing it? Well, in today's episode, we are going to be covering the 1999 London nail bombings.
So as Joey just said, we just want to make it very, very clear that this story is very, very traumatic, and it covers topics like racism, homophobia, and also prejudice against minority communities. So just remember that before watching it. And we will do our best as normal blokes, two normal blokes, as if they were discussing these stories down the pub, would do, to give both the victims justice, but also to tell this story in the most fair way we possibly can. Be warned though, this is a tough one.
So first off, we head to the corner of Electric Avenue in Brixton. It is Saturday, the 17th of April, 1999, and the area is thriving. Electric Avenue does have your traditional high street shops like Iceland on the corner, for example, but it's also the home of the street markets, and it's a very diverse and multicultural area.
Didn't you used to work a little bit in Brixton?
Yep.
What was it like?
Did a bit.
What was it like when you worked there?
Brixton was good. Brixton was good. Yeah. Brixton was good. There's always good vibes in that. Like every area, like you've got your rough parts and you've got your not so rough parts and stuff like that. But yeah, always found the people of Brixton lovely. Always enjoyed working there. And Electric Avenue itself, always like hustle and bustle, but in a very, very good way. You got people 5 meters selling fish, and then the next 5 meters on selling, mobile phone cases back in these days and stuff like that. So really, really nice sort of area of Brixton, Electric Avenue, in my opinion. Very much somewhere that I'd go to on a day out in London, something like that. But this particular day started like any other Saturday. All of the market traders were going about their business, trying to make a bit of money where they could. But after a little while, some of the market traders started to notice some suspicious activity, and it all centered around basically a duffel bag, a gym bag that was left unattended. There was actually a young man, right, a child really, named Gary Shilling, and he stated that he had seen a man walk over and put this bag down. Now, this bag was put down on the corner of Electric Avenue, very, very busy area. It was actually outside Iceland, and all of the different market traders were trying to work out, what it was and whatnot. They were actually hearing noises coming from this bag, until eventually one of them, that was a guy that sold records, vinyls, things like that, he actually opens up the bag. Now, when he opens up the bag, he describes it as being like a cartoon bomb that he's seen, right? So he said that it's like the sort of bomb you'd see in a cartoon, clocks taped to other bits and pieces, nails in there, explosives, and it's in this gym bag, and it's actually quite a new gym bag, a sort of leather, I don't know the exact brand, but it's actually quite a new one. And what ends up happening is, firstly, the people and the market traders are unsure whether it is actually a bomb, and secondly, and it sounds mental now looking back and understanding what happened, but no one knows what to do. So do you know what starts happening?
Do you know what I can't believe about this is? I don't know if this is a sign of the time, but like I feel that people just run a mile right now if they saw a device like this in the middle of London.
100%.
Whereas I don't know if it's naivety, but people just didn't necessarily expect this to be an actual bomb.
So the first thing that everyone was saying is go and put it in the bin. Go and put it in the bin. Right? So the bin wouldn't have done all that much.
No.
Into it might have reduced a few injuries and whatnot, but it wouldn't have done that.
I mean,
much.
it might have exacerbated the injuries if it's like a metal bin or something like that. Yeah,
Could
yeah.
well have done. Yeah. But however, what a lot of people were doing were actually just moving the bag around, moving the bag from one place to another, from one place to another. Now, it is reported, and there's many people that will back up this claim, right? It was even claimed by the guy who saw it happen in the Netflix documentary on this incident that what do we call it on this? What do we call it? A substance.
Someone that enjoyed extracurricular activities in their spare time,
and
did it quite copiously.
By spare time, we mean all the time.
Yeah.
Basically, an addict saw the bag, saw the bomb in the bag, took the bomb in the Tupperware container out of the bag, and nicked the bag.
This is, can you just say, by the way, like picking a bomb up, like we're talking about a really serious device, like Joey's described as a cartoon device with nails, with explosives clearly shown in it, to lift that up and out of that. I would literally be running a mile right now. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near this. I definitely wouldn't touch it. You know, in those films where they're like, oh yeah, cut the blue wire, cut the red wire. You're just like, mate, it's going to go off. Mate, just don't touch the thing. I swear
to God, but that just, for me, epitomizes what kids will do.
Yeah, so true.
Like, he's probably looking at that bag and he's thinking, that's worth about 20 quid, that bag. That could get me a hit. And do you know what I always say? Little lesson in life, right? Would you ever let a kid grind harder than you?
Sorry, grind?
Grind.
Like, we did a video on the grinder.
Work harder than you.
No.
No?
No. 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 But to be fair, they probably would.
If they don't have you know what that day, do they go to bed without it?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. No. They find a way to get it. Never let a kid grind harder than you. If
quote Joey Knight on that.
If you don't have money, you think like a kid and go and get some.
Who needs high performance podcasts when you've got that kind of knowledge coming from you?
Exactly. But anyway, this random kid, he ends up taking the bag off. So the bomb's just on the floor now, by the way. Police have been called, and as the police arrive, it's actually 27 minutes past 5 o'clock, the bomb detonates. Now, we knew that there were nails inside the Tupperware container, but what we didn't realise was that these were 4-inch nails and they were flying in all directions, injuring a total of 48 people, many of which were seriously injured. We are talking people being blinded, we're talking limbs being amputated, people's body parts being lodged into other people. However, there were actually no fatalities this day.
That bomb was pretty significant. Like the 4-inch nails within inside that was scary. And I actually saw there was a kid that actually got hit by one of the nails.
There was the X-ray of the nail inside the child's head.
Yeah.
It was embedded in there. The child survived. Obviously.
How the hell did the kid survive, by the way?
Miraculous. And do you know what? Like, out of such a horrific incident, there were more sort of miraculous things to come from it. Like the fact that nobody died. The fact that nobody died in this specific one. Experts, so not just police, experts in bomb manufacturing and stuff like that, said that this device was made specifically for maximum damage, and it was a miracle that not one single person lost their lives.
Well, you saw the explosion, right? We've seen the footage of it in this episode. Like, that was a big explosion. It was a big detonation, and you saw just panic straight away from all of these people that were all around him. I can't believe people didn't pass away.
But do you know what? But do you know what else you saw? And this leads me back to the sense of community, and like, you know, one of the reasons I always enjoyed my time, like when I was in and around the Brixton area, is that everyone was just trying to help each other. And you'll learn from the video as it goes on that there's clearly, diversity divides, community divides, religion, race, everything like that. There's none of that in the aftermath of this. Everyone's helping everyone. Everyone is trying to come to the aid of those that are injured. There was one guy who had a nail embedded into his foot, and he actually gave up his stretcher because he could see someone with a worse injury, and he just let his mate help him sort of put his arm over his shoulder and limp him to, I suppose, a taxi or something like that to go to the hospital. He said, why am I going to take up a stretcher that someone else could need who's way more injured than me when I've just got a nail in my foot? And it really did summarize just what a sense of community there was there on Electric Avenue in Brixton that day.
Absolutely. And I think what we should try and do next is give some more context to the time period that we're in as well, because I don't know if I'm just being nostalgic about this time period, mate, and you can tell me how you felt about it, but I didn't feel like we both grew up in this time. We're talking about 1999, by the way, for anyone.
So we literally grew up
we literally
time.
did.
Like, I was born in 1994, so by you were 92. Yeah. So by 99, you're coming up to the sort of ages where you're in school and you're potentially about to go into high school and things like that. You're very much in that period, especially me, an early bloomer of like coming of age in that time. So it's a time period we remember well. It
was. And I remember like 9/11 happening, and I remember being in the car and hearing the news for the first time. And obviously that was in 2001, 2 years after this incident. And I remember being so shocked by that incident that I hadn't remembered anything previous to that being in the same guise of that, the same terrorist activity, being huge casualties. You know what I mean? I didn't remember any of that. So what I tried to do is I actually went back and I actually looked at terrorist incidents in the UK during this time period. Now, before this, there wasn't sort of like domestic or foreign terrorism other than from people like the IRA.
IRA was most of...
And let's be honest, there were huge attacks by the IRA in the 90s. There were a lot of incidents within London as well. The biggest incident in terms of the most casualties, not in terms of fatalities, but the most casualties, was actually the Manchester truck bomb. Right. And that was actually the most recent incident that happened before this time. This was in 1996. 200 people were actually injured by this truck bomb by the IRA. But what the reason why I make this point is that was in 1996, as I say. We're now in 1999. There's a 3-year period where there's relative peace in England. Do you know what I mean? There's not that many incidents going on.
And not just that, like it's not, listen, there's problems that still loom in society in 2025 today. So I'm not saying that any of these have gone away, but say, for example, I think it was 1981 with the race riots in Brixton. Obviously, you know, you're talking the best part of 2 decades later on from that. And, you know, a lot of things have settled down. I'm not saying things like racism and stuff weren't still there, but it was to an extent where things had started to settle down somewhat. And I'm sure that there were members of minority communities that still weren't happy with the way that police enforcement went about. And there was obviously gang-related problems and stuff like that. But it wasn't a time when people were on high alert in the town of Brixton, for example. No,
we've got new Labour coming in. Obviously, Tony Blair is there. And I think at the start of Tony Blair's reign as Prime Minister, there was a feeling of optimism. We hadn't got involved in wars. Do you know what I mean? This is pre-Iraq. Do you know what I mean? And I just generally think there was a moment in history in 1999 where we were optimistic about the future. Like the internet, that basically 20% of the UK had internet at this point, or were actively using it very regularly. The Millennium Dome had just been built. The London Eye that's coming in at the end of 1999. There was obviously the big Millennium celebrations, which were huge and being planned even in April in this period of time. There was a lot to sort of like look forward to. And I felt like in London, in England, in the UK, people were optimistic about the future and things were on the way up. Like, again, just you talk about race relations and issues at the time, kick it out, you know, the campaign for, you know, no racism in football. That was actually launched in 1997, but became a formal organization in 1999. Okay. So again, like there's a lot of like positive change going on in society. So do you want to save a boatload of cash this summer? Well, I've got an offer just for you, and it's through our partners and new partners of the channel, Saily. What they offer is eSIM, so you can get access to internet from anywhere in the world, wherever you are. And if you want to do that on us, just make sure you hit the link in the description and use code JoeyandJosh for 15% off your first order. So Saily gets you a local SIM card that you can put on your phone when you're traveling, and therefore you do not have to pay those crazy roaming fees. And they've got plans in 160 countries and in 8 regions. So basically wherever you're going, you are going to be covered. So how does it work? All you've got to do is hit the link in the description and you download an app. It's available on iOS or Android. And then what you do is you select a plan. You can choose whatever plan you like. And then you just have to install the eSIM on your phone. And when you land in your holiday destination, it will work instantly. And if that wasn't easy enough, you only ever have to install this Saily eSIM once. So next time you're going on holiday, it's already loaded up on your phone. You just select the new location and it is simple as that. And what we love about Saily is it's basically faster than some of the hotel Wi-Fi's we've used. So we've actually been able to stay connected and operate in a quicker way than even we'd be able to if we'd logged into a hotel Wi-Fi. They've got 24-hour support, so you can contact them whenever you need. And they have a full refund policy if your eSIM, for whatever reason, isn't compatible. So get sorted with Saily for your next trip. Make sure you hit the link in the description and use code Joey and Josh for that 15% off. Thank you so much to Saily for sponsoring this episode, and let's get back into the video.
You've led me to the conclusion that although you would highly suspect that it is, it's not a foregone conclusion at this point that this is a terrorist attack. No. It's not at this specific point. We're in the area of Brixton, right? It is an area that obviously, like 80% of London boroughs, is one that is known to have gang violence and stuff like that. And although gang violence doesn't normally result in bombings and things like that, we weren't quite sure at the time what had happened. I think it was suspected that it was a terror attack, but we weren't quite sure. I think that the residents of Brixton, and especially those from ethnic minorities and things like that, they suspected it, definitely, but it wasn't really sure. And that kind of takes us to the next Saturday when we got a lot more answers to the questions that we had, doesn't it?
100%, yeah. It's 1 week after, unfortunately, another bomb was detonated. This time it was in Brick Lane. And yeah, as I say, it's April the 24th. Someone actually spots another sports bag, and it's left between 2 parked cars. Obviously, there's no one else around it. And actually, this is a bit of an interesting timing in that because it was a Saturday, Brick Lane wasn't as busy as it could have been. Now, what you might not know if you don't live in London is that Brick Lane becomes really busy on Sunday where the markets are, but also on weekdays when people are out and about getting lunch, getting dinner. Do you know what I mean? Like that's when it's really, really packed. But this was on a Saturday, so there's not that many people about. So someone actually sees this bag and they actually move it 200 meters up the road. And this guy actually puts it in the back of his Ford car. Yeah. Right? Now, when he opens it, he sees a bomb. My immediate reaction, as I said for the first one, would be to run the fuck away. This guy tries to do what he thinks is the right thing and take it to a police station. There is actually a police station on Brick Lane.
He puts the bag in the boot of the car, and he walks to the police station to tell them, I think I found a bomb. So obviously he tries to get the police station's closed. He then tries to get to relevant authorities. He couldn't get to them in time. So at 5:54, that bomb actually goes off in the middle of Brick Lane. Now, there are obviously lots of eyewitnesses, a lot of residents that were in the area, and a local resident actually says that he thought it was an earthquake because of how serious the sort of the noise and the movement of the ground actually was. And he actually noticed seeing this sort of like burning car flying through the air. So powerful was that explosion. And again, this same eyewitness actually said that afterwards he saw nails on the ground about 200 feet away. So you're talking what, like 70 odd meters away from the explosion. So that just shows you like how powerful the actual detonation was. Now, again, the silver lining to this incident is that the lane, Brick Lane, wasn't actually that busy, and only 13 people in comparison to the mass injuries of the first time were actually injured. And again, there were no fatalities. And now what is clear at this moment, and I'm interested to see your perspective on this because like police are trying to piece this together at the same time, is that
there is a connection between these two places. Like obviously we're talking about a detonation a week apart, right? But there's something that links these two locations that would mean that there's a pattern.
Well, there is. There's a huge connection between the two locations. As I say, I've spent a lot of time in Brick Lane too, but not working, more going out raving and stuff like that. Used to have quite a few good nightclubs on Brick Lane, probably still do. But yeah, spent a lot of time up Brick Lane. Obviously worked a bit in Brixton, spent a lot of time in Brixton. They're both very, very, is the word multicultural? Both very, very multicultural communities. And in terms of, if you think of the population of Great Britain, and you think of the percentage, which I don't actually know off the top of my head, that is
ethnic
minorities. What I would say is these are very densely populated areas by those ethnic minorities. There's also a reason why they're very popular areas, because, you know, Brick Lane's a fun area, loads of cool stuff going on, like street markets, loads of cool stuff. If I'm gonna go for a day out up in London, I said about Electric Avenue, I'm going Brick Lane. Brick Lane's good fun because you're not far from Shoreditch then as well. You can literally walk from Brick Lane onto Shoreditch High Street. Loads of cool stuff going on up there. So it's a fun place in London to be around. It's definitely a place where it is heavily populated by ethnic minorities. So when you get the second bomb going off in a place that is, I would say in my experience, and I don't know the numbers for this, but in my experience, more densely populated by ethnic minorities in terms of Brick Lane in comparison to Brixton itself, then you're going to draw the lines together and immediately you're going to think, right, this has got a racial or a religious element to it.
Exactly. And that's what the police started doing. And obviously, you know, again, in 1999, they didn't have the level of like internet research, data, cameras. You can imagine if an incident like this happened now, you would have phone footage. You'd have so much record, wouldn't you, of something like this. But again, what the police can do is they can look at what the communities were like in that area and say, there's a pattern of someone targeting these communities. And that's basically what they did.
One of the things about this is the police at this point, once the Brick Lane bomb has gone off, they do actually have a CCTV image who they believe has a high chance of being the perpetrator. You can obviously see the image on screen now. White male wearing a hat. He's actually wearing the exact same outfit, more or less. Twice in a row, both weekends, from the first bomb that was set off in Electric Avenue to the second bomb that was set off on Brick Lane. Now, it has been debated. There's been certain police officers that have denied this. There's been certain police officers that have claimed this to be the case. But it's been debated that they actually had this piece of CCTV footage of this man before the bomb went off in Brick Lane. So again, there was a article I was watching, and it was a former detective, and he said that as soon as he saw the image, he believed that the image should have been leaked to the newspapers straight away. Do you know this man, right? And I'm in agreement with it, right? I'm in agreement because straight away, what you can do, I always say this, instead of looking at it from a witch hunt perspective, someone could go, yeah, I know him, that's my next door neighbour, and you can rule him out. You can rule him out. They could have an alibi. He came round for a takeaway that night. I've got him on my, well, not ring doorbells back then, but do you know what I mean? You can rule someone out straight away, and therefore you can then continue your investigation in more promising lines, right? They didn't release the image. Had they have released the image, because eventually they did, right?
Yeah, I've got the timeline for that later on in the episode, actually.
They would have very quickly got a name. So the fact that there's a potential there that the police had this image and didn't release it to the public could have potentially stopped the second bombing. It could have potentially stopped what was to come. It could have potentially stopped many more injuries. But I think what the police were worried about, being that it was ethnic minorities that so far were looking to be targeted, and this was a white male that was in the images. Let's say, for example, it wasn't this man. I think that the police were worried that this could start racial tensions and stuff
also
like
vigilantism as well. Like you never, there is a point in which until you've got enough evidence to find the person and to be able to identify them, then obviously you can't necessarily leak this information. Now, the only caveat to this, and I'll try and give the police some credit in cases like this. I'm always that guy, right? Whereas you're the one that doesn't like the police as much. But I've heard what they were trying to do is they were trying to enhance the images, and they were trying to be able to actually, allow someone to be able to identify him. CCTV in this period isn't as sort of like good as it is now. It's not digital, it's all on cameras and tape. And so I think the initial footage they got of him wasn't as clear as it was when it finally was released to the public. But yeah, like as you say, even grainy images, even someone that might look similar might have prevented what was the next bombing, which was even more dangerous than the ones we've just been talking about.
And the images that we speak about that were released to the public were actually released to the public in the days prior to the third and final bombing. Yep. As soon as those images were released, there were, I think, around 500 names given. And one police officer that I saw interviewed said that very rarely were the same names popping up 2 or 3 times. Yeah. So let's say, for example, we covered the Ian Huntley case, the killing of the 2 schoolgirls, Holly and Jessica. As soon as Ian Huntley did a TV interview, the police phone lines went berserk with people saying, you need to understand this man's background, this and that, and whatever. It was so apparent, right? Whereas although there was a name that was given, and it did turn out to be the perpetrator, it wasn't a consistent name that was just being given over and over and over again. So again, like you say, I sometimes go against, the police and whatnot, but I can understand that if you've been given around 500 names and none of them make up 20% of the names that you've been given, I can understand how it could be anyone. And there are political movements like the BNP at this time, NF, things like that, really, if you look at pictures from demonstrations and marches, the guy in the CCTV could be any of hundreds of people at those marches.
It also just looks like a person walking through the street. Like, he's very nondescript. It could be anyone. This is the thing. And also again, like, I don't just want to be an apologist for police always on these episodes, but what I will say is it takes a lot of time to close those inquiries out. It takes a lot of manpower in an age where they don't have, computer systems as advanced as they are right now to be able to go, we'll go down that line of inquiry. We'll hear one of the 500 names, and then we'll find and clear them and get alibis from them. Like, all of that takes time.
However, regardless of the name, the perpetrator would have seen his images in the newspapers. He would know that the police were hot on his tail. And therefore, this time, instead of it being on the Saturday, he chooses Friday, the 30th of April. He chooses the area of Soho in London. This is the third and final bomb that goes off. And it's actually not out in the open public, nor is it seemingly targeting a certain ethnic minority, which is what had begun to be expected of the attacks. This time, it's the Admiral Duncan pub in Soho, a pub that had been in business from the early 19th century, but in more recent years had become a very well-known bar for members of the homosexual community. A black bag laid at the bar in between 2 bar stools. But despite the 2 previous bombs, the circumstances here were actually very different.
In what way were they different?
Well, as I say, firstly, it's inside. Secondly, obviously, this is predominantly a gay bar, right? And the homosexual community weren't considered the target for whoever was doing this. Also, you're inside. Now, I'm not saying the hustle and bustle of Electric Avenue and, you know, Brick Lane, which was actually obviously a lot quieter at the time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that those weren't loud, but in this bar, it would have been quite loud. So do you remember when we heard the market traders saying that they could hear the bomb ticking?
Yeah.
I think that there's a good chance in the Admiral Duncan pub, there's just not, you know, there's not the ability to be able to hear the actual bomb itself. And also, right, if I'm at a pub, right, if I'm in a boozer and I'm sinking 1 or 2 pints after work, right? Let's say I finish off my second pint and I think, do you know what? I've got time for one more and I've got my gym bag on me. Bearing in mind the size of my gym bag, which is about the same size as these duffel bags, right? I think I probably would leave it at the bar if I was stood there at the bar. I think I probably would leave it at the bar. I don't think I'm going to get the gym bag on my back, go in, unzip, go in the urinal, go for a wee, whatever. I think I'd probably just leave it at the bar. Do you know what I mean?
It's a very common thing to do that. Just leave your bag out in the middle of a pub. It is.
I mean,
it's normal.
I mean, also, it's like, don't sit here because there's someone sitting here. So they're the reasons why I do think that it's very, very different. However, by 6:37, suspicion had begun to arouse over this bag because it had been left unattended for so long. And that's when pub manager Mark Taylor went to inspect it. And exactly as he does, the device goes off. Now, this would tragically be the worst and most impactful of the bombings. 3 people lost their lives, one of which was a pregnant mother in Andrea Dykes. Herself and her husband Julian were actually in the pub at the time to celebrate the pregnancy, but more importantly to meet with friends Nick and John, as they wanted to ask John to be the godparent to the unborn child. Out of the 4 adults and the unborn child, just Julian would survive the bomb, which, as well as the 3 fatalities, injured 79 more people. 3 more people had to have limbs amputated, and many, many more suffered injuries that affect them until this very day. So with this 3rd bomb and another completely different part of society, I think we would say, being targeted, it obviously arose way more questions for the police, and it made the case a lot more complicated in terms of profiling who they were looking for. So, Josh, why don't you give me a bit of information on exactly how the police did go about trying to catch the bomber?
So as you can imagine, the Met Police are under a huge amount of pressure now. There's been 3 bombings in central London targeting ethnic minorities all around the capital. And also there's a very realistic threat that there could be more incidents. So there's a huge amount of work that does go on by the police. They're considering all different types of motives and reasons for this attack. But as Joey and I have sort of said earlier on in this podcast, they obviously knew that these places had symbolic relevance, you know, and what they were. Obviously within Brixton, there was the riots in 1981. So again, they had a theory that this could be mostly racially motivated incidents just because of that bombing alone. And indeed, there was an increased police presence in Brixton after the attack, where basically detectives and police officers were going around talking with members of the community, giving out surveys for people to be able to identify anyone that they'd seen, anyone that looked unusual, anyone that, you know, was doing things that might have been suspicious. At this time, they weren't giving the public the images that they had access to. And talking of those images, police actually had to go through 26 different CCTV cameras that were around the Brixton area and try and trawl through that evidence. And again, what you know is clear to say is that these were old school tapes, as I said earlier on, and so the footage wasn't that good. So after 5 days, on the 23rd of April, the police were actually able to identify the person from the images that we're talking about. Now, again, to make it clear, they didn't release those images to the public until the 29th of April. That was a day before the last attack. From the bombs itself, they were actually also able to get a lot of forensic information. Now, Joey, I don't understand how the police can identify so much information from something that literally explodes. Can you believe this, that they're able to piece together what the composition of the weapon actually was?
Well, it's not the police that actually do it.
Yeah,
it's the police that obviously get the help
evidence.
of the experts of, bomb manufacturing, bomb disposal, and stuff like that. But yeah, they did a good job to be able to really assert not only how the bombs were made and what they were designed to do, but also trying to sort of locate where they were bought from. There was a Crime Watch appeal, wasn't there?
There was.
I think, where someone said this, and they showed the amount of nails and said this is a really unusual amount of nails. A tradesman wouldn't be going in and buying this amount. I think it was something like 1,500 or something like that. 4-inch nails.
4-inch nails are big.
A tradesman wouldn't be going and buying those. So if you have sold these to someone, if you work in, I don't know, a home-based B&Q, I'm not sure what it was about at that time, then please come forward and let us know of any information.
Yeah, exactly that. And it wasn't just the nails that they'd been able to identify. They also found out that the detonation implement, the way that it was detonated, was via fireworks as well. So again, they were able to identify not just what was in the weapons, but also how they were detonated, which was really interesting. They also said that it was encased within a plastic pipe that was glued on either end. And they actually were able to sort of say it's a relatively unsophisticated weapon, but still a weapon that can inflict so much damage. And again, as we say, could easily have killed people. And it was lucky, really, that it didn't kill anyone in the first 2 bombings, but unfortunately in the third that there were 3 fatalities. As I say, on the 29th of April, the police finally leaked the images to the public. It's in every newspaper. It's all over the television. The public are finally able to identify the person that could have perpetrated this crime. Now, this is where it really starts hotting up. And there are a lot of people that immediately call the police and say that they've seen this person. The first person was Reno, who was a taxi driver who actually took the perpetrator to Brick Lane. That was how they connected in the first place. Secondly, there was a colleague who also was able to identify the person. They actually called the police at 5:30 on the 30th of April and say who they thought it could have been. And then finally, and again, I would say a key lead as well, was another person called Arthur, who was actually within and based within the British National Party at the time, actually operating effectively as a spy within the British National Party, who again identified this person and said that they knew who they were.
But just quickly, before we get into all that, I just want to let you guys know about our memberships on the channel. For £4.99 per month, you can become a member and officially join the hardcore. This will give you access to all of our videos up to 48 hours before they're uploaded to the general public. Not only that, you will be getting a weekly members-only live stream from myself and Josh, where you can suggest cases that you want to see covered, and every single week we will be exclusively telling you guys the next case that will be coming out.
So based on this information, on April the 30th, the police take a squad and they go to a place in Hampshire and they actually arrest someone. When they arrest this person, they see within their flat, within their house, that there is a quite wide range of paraphernalia, which is incredibly concerning. They actually basically say that this guy was actively involved in building another bomb at the time.
He was in the process, I've heard, of building a bomb. And one of the things that I heard about this case as well, I'd love to confirm this, was that it wasn't his flat, by the way. He was renting a room, I believe. He was actually renting a room off an elderly woman. And imagine that, imagine having no idea what is going on and the fact that the perpetrator of everything that is going on is living under your roof. And obviously, this brings us on to the man in question, which is David Copeland.
Now, it wasn't hard to figure out what Copeland was into when they did go into that bedroom. He had 2 Nazi flags that were adorned onto his bedroom wall. He also had a crossbow. He had several hunting knives. He had a gas-powered pistol as well. And, as we say, a cupboard full of explosives. So this guy is a very dangerous man. And quite frankly, straight away, he actually admitted, I was the one that did it. There was no one else I was working with. This is who I am. He was quite a chatty man to the police.
But what I want to know and what the viewers will want to know is, how did David Copeland become this dangerous man? Well, David Copeland was born on May the 15th, 1976 in Hanworth, West London. He was the middle child of 3 brothers and was said to have grown up as a very shy individual. In his early teenage years, he admitted to having violent fantasies, but I don't think that they ever translated into actions. The reason I say this is there is so little actually known about David Copeland's upbringing and childhood from others around him. Literally, hardly anyone, if anyone, remembers David Copeland at school. So much so that once it was uncovered who the bomber was, journalists were scouring to try and find people that had grown up with him, that had known him, that had gone to school with him, and no one was able to give a description of what he was even like. However, the best job any journalist was able to do on finding out more about David Copeland was a man named Nick Ryan. He actually alleged that in Copeland's younger years, he was so homophobic that in the early 80s, when his family would sit down to watch the Flintstones, they would actually sing along to the theme song. And there was a lyric in the theme song that says, "We'll have a gay old time." Obviously, gay being another word for happy. And that actually really, really agitated David Copeland to a point where he would no longer watch that with his family. He did leave school with 7 GCSEs, which is slightly above average, but he didn't ever really manage to nail down a job until his father managed to get him a job working on the London Underground. Now, just quickly, how concerning is that? Like, I know he was targeting specific ethnic minorities or specific communities, but to have access to the London Underground, especially, you know, knowing what went on in less than a decade to come in London, having a terrorist working on the London Underground, that's a scary thought, isn't it?
Wasn't he working within the construction of the London Underground as well? Like, he wasn't just sort of like a train driver or someone that worked at the stations. Like, he was actively working on the lines of London Underground. So yeah, he had quite a lot of access, and yeah, absolutely terrifying, to be fair.
But at the same time, he had quite a good job there, quite a stable job, quite a well-paid job. But by the age of 21 years old, it was said that Copeland had become a complete recluse, separating himself from family and friends. But it was at this point that he became a member of the BNP, the British National Party. It was at the same age that Copeland actually went to see a doctor about his mental health, and he said to the doctor that he felt like he was losing his mind. That doctor prescribed him antidepressants.
To be fair, he wouldn't have said to the doctor that he wanted to kill people, would he?
No, he may well not have done. But after his arrest, he actually said something really, really concerning to the police. He said that my aim was political. It was to cause a racial war in this country. There'd be backlash from the ethnic minorities. Then all the white people will go out and vote for the BNP.
So you know what most criminals are like when they get arrested? They'll try and keep as much as they possibly can to themselves. They try not to give it away. But now Copeland was the complete opposite of that. He would not stop talking, and he made it very, very clear what his motivations were for the bombing and why he actually did it. I think, you know, we've described it quite clearly. He obviously had white supremacist views, and he actually said in the interview, "I believe that there is a master race." He also said that he wanted to cause murder, mayhem. He wanted to maim people. Like, it was quite clear. And I think more than anything, he obviously wanted to be famous, and the fame of the incident was quite important to him.
He admitted that.
He said it, didn't he?
It was one of the most, is candid the word? It was one of the most honest sort of interviews. Like, oh my God, mate, since we've been doing this true crime channel, we have heard some fucking bollocks in terms of excuses, in terms of...
We saw that in the last case.
This happened, that happened, or it was an accident, whatever. And I'm not going to use the expression fair play, but for once, when researching the case, it was actually quite refreshing to have the perpetrator just lay out his motivations, incentivizations, and his reasoning on the line, wasn't it?
Yeah, but what is weird about this is he's banged to rights at this point, isn't he? I mean, he's confessed. Like, the fact that there even was a trial for this is interesting because he just completely admitted to the whole thing. I don't know why we're wasting time with a full-blown trial with a jury.
He knew he would be
make
cool,
sense.
and let's be honest, he wanted to be cool.
He did.
He said the infamy. He said big, it's big news, isn't it? And things like that. So, yeah.
Before they get to the trial, though, they did do a psychiatric evaluation on this guy. They did a full, rundown to make sure that he was fit and able to stand trial. Now, 5 doctors actually said that he had paranoid schizophrenia, and 1 psychiatrist actually said that he had a personality disorder. What was clear is that he was mentally ill, and I think that's obvious to sort of say. If you've got 5 doctors, diagnosing it, I think that's something that the trial will have to do.
I personally wouldn't need a doctor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you one day rocked up here and you said, I hate ethnic minorities and I hate anyone from the homosexual community, I'd be thinking, hold on, you've got something a bit wrong with you, Josh.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I don't think you even need doctors to include that.
But
you've obviously got
procedurally,
something wrong with you. But the problem is the cop-out for a lot of these people is what they try to do is they try to plead insanity because they know that it's an easier time in prison, it's an easier ride, and sometimes it can even be a reduced sentence. I'm 100%. Not suggesting that Copeland actually did this, but we do know that he was assessed by doctors.
And they said that he was fit to face trial. And what was interesting, I don't know if you know this, but Copeland actually wrote some letters before he faced a jury.
I didn't know this.
So he wrote letters to someone that was called Patsy Scanlon. And that was actually a pseudonym because what he was actually called is Bernard O'Mahony. And in this letter, he basically said that I've fooled experts because I'm faking mental illness. And this letter was actually used in the trial, and it actually harmed his defense, saying that he should have been trialed for manslaughter due to diminished responsibility. So again, it all backfired into him. So let's get into the trial. This actually happened and started on the 5th of June 2000 at the Old Bailey. Now, again, something that surprised me about this show is that there wasn't actually any domestic terror legislation at the time. And again, when we're talking about the context at the start of this episode about there not being that many incidents outside of IRA incidents, this actually proves it, because he couldn't actually be charged with terrorism because there wasn't actually anything to charge him with. There was no laws at the time for domestic terrorism.
That's absolutely mental, isn't it?
Yeah. So he was actually charged with murder and causing an explosion, which I didn't even know was necessarily a crime. But anyway, he was charged with those 2 charges. And on June the 30th, the jury actually said that he was guilty and convicted him of the crimes. He was actually given 6 life sentences for the 3 lives that he took, as well as the explosions that he had caused. And that meant that he had a minimum sentence of 40 years. That in 2007 was actually increased to 50 years, meaning that he won't get out until 2049 at the earliest.
You say that though, right, at the earliest. Obviously, I'll go on to speak about something that happened in prison that actually added a bit of time on to his sentence. But for what he did and for what his intentions were, this man should never be getting out of prison. And this man can realistically be out of prison before, what, the age of 80?
Yeah, I think it was like 70 odd he would get out in terms of how old he was, because he was very young when he did this in his early 20s.
And this is what I'm saying. Yeah. It's mental.
It's
mental.
It's
mental because we often look at cases like this and we think that our judgment as just, like we say, 2 blokes in a pub, right? Yeah. Our judgment is close the door, throw away the key, yeah? But at the same time, prison isn't actually about that. It's actually, in the eyes of the law, about rehabilitation.
In the UK, it's about rehabilitation.
In the UK.
Yeah.
So can you be rehabilitated? And they would argue that a man of that age and being that young when he committed the crimes could possibly be rehabilitated. However, during his time in prison itself, obviously there were incidents that happened that we'll speak about that show that maybe those violent tendencies that he hadn't been rehabilitated by that point.
So true. And last thing I'll say on the trial itself is the judge, Michael Heim, said that you set out to kill, maim, and terrorize the community. You alone are accountable for ruining their lives. Nothing can excuse or justify the evil that you have done. So again, the impact of this case was so significant. It is weird that it wasn't a full life sentence, and it is weird that he has an opportunity to get out. But Copeland, as far as I'm aware, mate, and you tell me otherwise, is currently in HMP Frankland in Durham. Is that true?
Yeah, I think he is. When he was in prison, he hadn't actually been in prison for that long. He was involved in quite a serious attack. It was an attack of sorts that goes both ways. He was attacked, he attacked someone else. But again, it still shows the seriousness of his intent when he is looking to do damage to someone, because Copeland actually attacked someone with a prison shank, basically a modified razor blade. Now, one thing he did with this, right, when you make a prison shank, for example, what you'll normally do is, I don't know, boil it down, chisel it off so that you've got one sharp point, right? What some people will do is they'll use razor blades. Now, do you know why people use two separate razor blades?
No.
Right. So
let's
say, for example, you get a toothbrush in prison, right? You can stick a razor blade on there. You can cut someone. You can cut them across their face and where in the body, whatever, right? Sometimes what people do is they'll put two razor blades on there. And that is because if I was, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, yeah? If I was to slash your face, yeah, with a single razor, most hospitals will be able to stitch that back up. And then after, God, how many years are we talking now? Don't know, going about 10 years or so. After about 10 years or so, the scar's not even that visible. Like, it's still visible, but it's not, you know, people aren't looking at you from 10, 20 feet away and going, oh my God, and whatever, right? If you'd have got done with two separate razor blades, because of the way it cuts the face, the stitching process is a million times harder, meaning that basically you probably might have to have like skin grafts, things like that. The damage done and the visible damage is going to be a lot greater. So to be able to plan that out while you're in prison still shows that not only are you a very violent person, you're a very calculated person when it comes to carrying out those violent acts. It was actually an inmate called Thomas McDonough who David Copeland attacked. He was hospitalized and David Copeland's sentence was increased as a result of this attack.
There's something else about what happened in prison that I was incredibly shocked by, and so much so I don't know whether it's true. What do you think about this?
So this was reported heavily in 2021, and it was reported by pretty much every mainstream media outlet that you can think of. However, it isn't confirmed.
It's based on reports from an inmate within prison, isn't it? So
I think it's actually multiple inmates within the prison are saying this, but it hasn't actually been confirmed by Copeland himself. It hasn't been confirmed by prison staff. And actually, if this was the case, it wouldn't be. But the report is that David Copeland, the man who carried out the London nail bombings, the man who prioritized making and enforcing as much damage upon these minority communities as possible, the man that openly admitted he had a burning hatred for mass immigration into the UK, other ideologies, other religions, had converted in prison to Islam.
Yeah, apparently he wanted his name, or he wanted to be called. He wanted to be called Saddam. And he said he was actually inspired by Saddam Hussein. Yeah. That's why he wanted to use that name.
Well, firstly, if this is true, I think that we definitely need another psychiatric assessment. And that is not at all anything to do with finding Islam, finding any religion, Hinduism, Buddhism, anything, right? It's not to do with that. But it's to do with the fact that you are serving a sentence for attacking people and trying to harm people of this religion. Now, what has changed so much in prison that you now not only don't have the same feeling towards them, you now are ready to commit your life towards that religion? Do you think, let's go into the hypothetical world that this is fact and not fiction, and this hasn't been made up, and he has converted to Islam in prison. Do you think it's a genuine conversion, or do you think that this could be some kind of way of gaining some protection?
Well, this is the thing. Like, obviously, I don't know the prison system intricately, but I would, if I was going into prison, I'd just keep my head down and try and, you know, stay away from everyone as I possibly can.
It's a bit hard to do that. It's a bit hard to do that when you're the London nail bomber.
Yeah. Yeah, and people, this is the thing that I don't really quantify, but it gets out, doesn't it? People know who you are. They know what crimes you've committed. And so he would be in a lot of danger in prison, wouldn't he? We've already heard of attacks, you know, that he's inflicted and been inflicted upon as well. But again, I can understand why he might want to align with a different group of people if that meant that he might be protected, for instance.
And let's not deny that it does give you protection. The Islamic community will protect whoever they perceive to be their own, whether that is someone that is born into a Muslim family or whether that is someone that has converted later on in life. My question would be, and my sort of suspicion around it would be, I don't think he'd be welcomed by the Islamic community.
This is the thing. I don't understand it because the amount of crimes that he committed, the way he targeted that community, I just don't see the forgiveness being there. I don't know how you would be able to go into that circle of people and feel comfortable and able to be yourself,
or how that circle of people could feel comfortable with you. For all they know, you could be planning
more hate, more crimes,
more hatred, crimes, and
violence,
things like that. So I don't know. I find it very hard to believe. And the other thing as well is, like, we've heard these stories in more recent years, over the past sort of decade and a half. We've had I suppose you'd call him a political figure, a well-known figure in the UK, Tommy Robinson. He's been in and out of prison, and there have been reports many times that he's converted to Islam in prison, which he's sort of vigorously denied and said that he hasn't, and I personally would believe him of that. So I don't know. It could be hearsay, but when there's the amount of, like, you know, look, if the Sun report it, if the Daily Mail report it,
and that's where I've seen the news, to be fair.
But when you've got the likes of the Independent reporting,
have you seen the Independent article? Okay,
yes, Independent article reporting it.
Maybe that says something about the Independent more so than it does about the truth of these claims.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. So that is pretty much it. Obviously, our sincere condolences go to everyone involved. The fatalities that tragically happened as part of this horrible series of events, the lives that have been changed. You know, we spoke about limbs having to have been cut off, people that were permanently blinded for life, people that lost access of their legs and will now spend the rest of their life in wheelchairs and things like that. Just a awful series of events to happen, and to be carried out, in my opinion, by a man that, and I do use the word man very, very loosely, that at the age of just 22 probably doesn't even understand himself, let alone the world around him. So really hard case to cover, this one, wasn't it?
It's not just about the people that were directly injured as well, because, you know, our condolences absolutely go out to them, but it's also the level of fear and hatred that this might have stirred up, you know, those communities that had to deal with all of that fear and prejudice that they already have to deal with on a daily basis, that it could have got even worse. So yeah, it's a disgrace that we even had to live through that, but hopefully in finally capturing this guy and convicting him and being in prison, you know, that can start the healing process, and hopefully we can start living in a society that is more open and diverse and fair.
And I'll speak to you about that, or amplify what you say about that sort of healing process. As I say, I worked in Brixton, spent a bit of time there, absolutely loved it, treated so nicely by everyone there and everything, and you know what I mean, only fond memories of time I've spent on Brick Lane and anywhere else. So, you know, yeah, something that would have hit the communities of all three of the incidents very, very hard, but something that, unlike David Copeland, the victims and the communities have been able to show a lot more compassion and sort of not forget, but move on from. So that is where today's story ends. I hope you guys liked it. Again, I'm really sorry if this triggered anything in anyone that watched this, but we did make sure that we mentioned this at the beginning. There were very, very sensitive topics and subjects that we had to speak about in this video. If you guys are liking the content, please do us a massive favor. Slap a like on the video now and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And once again, this was a request from a member to cover this video. It's something that we've been doing time in, time out now. So keep getting your requests of what cases you want covered in the comment section below. We love you very much, and we will see you all in the next one.